at our symposium. We're on the last panel, and you're going to head off. You're going to start off for us. Let me give a quick introduction, if you don't mind, and then I'll open it up to your remarks, if you don't mind.
Sure. And where are you guys physically located? At Fried Frank?
Yes, 1 New York Plaza.
And who is talking right now?
My name's Kevin Appleby. I'm with the Center for Migration Studies.
Hey, Kevin.
How are you doing?
Great.
We met briefly at one of your bipartisan meetings, so good to see you again.
Thank you for coming, my man.
Yes, thank you. Let me just give you a quick introduction, even though you probably don't need an introduction. I'm going to give you one. So, Representative Tom Suozzi is a Democratic congressman representing the 3rd District of New York, which is northeastern Queens, if I'm not mistaken, and then part of the northern shore of Long Island. He represented his district from 2017 to 2023 and was reelected in a special election earlier this year and again earlier this month. Congressman Suozzi is a member of the House Homeland Security Committee and is co-chair of the Democrats for Border Security Task Force, and he has led bipartisan efforts to adopt legislation which seeks to balance border security with reform of the legal immigration system. And congratulations on your election, Congressman. It's tough to win one election a year, but to win 2 in 1 year is really a feat. So we welcome you, and we welcome your remarks, and we welcome your leadership. So thank you, and we'll wait to hear from you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for the good work you're doing. You left out a lot of my bio. One of the things in my bio is that I ran for governor of New York and got my butt kicked. And I was out of Congress. That was in 2022. So I was out of Congress. And then the guy that won my seat was George Santos, and he became a well-known figure in the United States of America. And he got kicked out, and they asked me to run in a special election, and I won my special election. And the race I just won, Trump won my district by 19,000 votes. So for me to win, he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. For me to win, I had to make up a lot of votes, and a lot of people must have voted for both he and I in order for me to win that seat. So as a matter of fact, I'm one of the top 3 overperforming seats in the country as far as how I did versus the Democrats at the top of the ticket, Vice President Harris. And the border was a very big issue because what happened was in February, really my whole career, I've been focused on immigration. My father was born in Italy, came to the United States as a young boy, lived a great American success story. When I was the mayor of my hometown for 8 years, my first speech I gave, big part was my inauguration. A lot of it was about the newcomers from Central and South America that were gathering on street corners. And I set up the first day worker shape-up center anywhere on the East Coast of the United States of America in 1994, where people, if they got hired and didn't get paid, we would advocate to make sure they got paid. And if they didn't get hired, they could stay and learn to speak English or learn a job skill. And we did that in conjunction with Catholic Charities and a Latino group, La Fuerza Unida. And I was involved with a lot of issues when I was county executive of Nassau County for 8 years, really battling with ICE at the time because of stuff that they were doing where they literally were drawing guns on Nassau County police officers and breaking down the doors of people's houses that they didn't have the proper search warrants for. But that's a whole nother story. And so when I first came to Congress in 2017, I wanted to work on immigration, but nobody was really interested what the Italian guy from Long Island had to say about immigration. And so I really didn't get to do much on immigration until I won the special election in 2024, earlier this year. And I was the first Democrat to really talk about, no, we must secure the border. Matter of fact, my consultants were saying, don't talk about the border. It's a Republican issue. And I said, no, it's an American issue. It's what everybody's talking about. And we have to lean into this and address it. And I really made a big deal when Trump killed the bipartisan Senate deal about how, you guys say this is such a serious issue, but you're not really fixing it. You just want to run on the chaos and you don't want to give Biden a win. So the first thing I did was I did a letter with a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania, Brian Fitzpatrick, who's the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, of which I used to be a member, 25 Democrats and 25 Republicans who meet regularly to try and find common ground. And we sent a letter to the president. We said, Mr. President, we would need you to use your, now that the Senate deal is dead, we need you to use your executive authority to secure the border. and to stop permitting asylum applications in between the ports of entry. And was actually, what we proposed was stricter than what they had in the Senate bipartisan deal. And the president ended up doing that. We also coupled with that in a bipartisan fashion, the desire to give work permits to spouses, undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. Everybody thinks if you marry a U.S. citizen, you become a citizen. But there are literally at least 500,000, probably 1 million people in the United States of America that are undocumented, that are married to U.S. citizens that can't even get a work permit. And so the president did an executive order on that, but it's being challenged in the courts right now. After that, I realized we have to build a bipartisan coalition to address this problem. And I've been working with a Republican from Texas, and I particularly asked him to help me because he's a right-wing conservative Republican who's a former Navy SEAL, who when he first ran for Congress, he had an 11-way primary, and they said, "Are you joining the Freedom Caucus?" And 10 of the members running raised their hand, and he didn't raise his hand. And they said, "Well, why aren't you going to join the Freedom Caucus?" He said, "Because I'm a conservative and I don't have to prove myself to anybody, and I'm not giving my vote away to this group because they require you to vote in a block." And so he said all the right things in the Homeland Security meetings that I was with him, saying we've got to work together, we got to try and find solutions, enough of the finger pointing, which is a lot of the same stuff that I say. And I started talking to him, and he and I have been meeting with hundreds of people over the past year to build a coalition of business, badges, and the Bible to try and find a bipartisan way forward to, one, secure the border, two, to fix the broken asylum system that's being abused right now, and three, to treat people like human beings, to try and modernize some of the legal immigration system related to Dreamers and TPS recipients and farm workers and healthcare workers and Afghan readjustment. And we're relying on all of this border, asylum, modernizing the legal immigration system. We're relying on a lot of legislation that's already been done, and it's been negotiated in a bipartisan fashion for many years, but it never could get over the finish line because there wasn't enough outside support to push enough members of Congress to get on board with it. So we're not trying to create anything new, a few exceptions, but not that much new. But we need to build this coalition of people to get it done. Now, I'm not certain where it's going based upon the results of the election, but my feeling is that a lot of people are going to freak out about the president's deportation talk. And that may motivate certainly Democrats, certainly outside advocacy groups, certainly our business badges in the Bible coalition, and hopefully a bunch of reasonable Republicans that realize that a mass deportation system will be devastating to business, to law enforcement, and will violate our sense of justice in the way that we treat people, because it will really cause tremendous anarchy. I was just asked about it on CNN today, about the idea of the president saying, maybe he'll use the military to help with this, which would violate, I believe, posti comitatus, which is you can't use the military to do civilian enforcement. So, out of difficult situations, we have to find the good and the positive. And I think that we have to use this change in our politics in America as a vehicle by which to get something done and to get people to actually work together to solve this problem. There's a lot of talk about resistance, and resistance is important, especially when somebody's trying to propose something crazy, like using the military for something like this. But we have to also work to get something done across party lines to finally address a problem that we've had for 30 years. The asylum system, when it was first set up in 1980, was, we were excited when somebody asked for asylum. When somebody from the Soviet Union said, I seek asylum, everyone's like, yes, we're winning, we're the good guys. They want to come to America. They don't like the Soviets. We have a better system. Come, we'll give you asylum. That law has changed in like 1986 or so, but it hasn't been changed since 1986. And now the asylum system is being abused by cartels and by organized crime and by coyotes that are taking people to the southern border and telling them what to say in order to get through the first test of asylum. And most of the people are seeking asylum for economic reasons, even though they don't necessarily say that in their first interviews. 85% of those cases ultimately get declined. But it takes 6 or 7 or 8 years to resolve the cases because the system is so overwhelmed and it's not designed to deal with all these people seeking asylum. So we've got to secure the border, fix the broken asylum system, and address some of these things that we've been talking about for such a long time, like the Dreamers and TPS recipients and farm workers, et cetera. So I believe that there are enough reasonable people on the Republican side and enough reasonable people on the Democratic side that we can find a way forward. But it's going to be a big challenge. Don't underestimate how important the people in this room are. We need you more than anything else. We need outside support to encourage members of the Congress and the Senate to come to a bipartisan solution. Businesses don't want to see mass deportation. Law enforcement doesn't want this thrown into their lap and all the chaos that will cause and people be afraid to go to the government for help. And when people are afraid of the government, where do they get protection from? They go to gangs. We don't want that. And people that, when I say the Bible, anybody who believes in, basic human dignity, people don't want people treated so poorly, especially if you've been living here for 20 or 30 years already, or 10 years even. So I believe there's a way forward. I'm committed to working on this. I now have a voice that I didn't have before on the issue of immigration. I'm the chair of the Democrats for Border Security, and I'm also in a group that the leader, Hakeem Jeffries, put together of the chair of, or the ranking member of Homeland Security, the ranking member of Judiciary, or the Immigration Subcommittee, I should say, the Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, people from border states, and others to try and find a way forward. But it's going to require a lot of cooperation and relationship building, and we need all of you to help in that effort. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. We need your help.
Thank you, Congressman.
And Freed Frank, I used to work for Sherman and Sterling. I worked for Arthur Anderson and Company, got my CPA, and then I went to law school and I clerked for the Chief Judge of the Eastern District, and then I worked for Sherman and Sterling. So I couldn't get a job at Freed Frank. I wasn't good enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have
So am I done, or you want to ask questions, or what happens now?
we might have a couple of questions, but I don't know what your time restraints are.
I have all the time in the world for you.
And do we have any questions from the floor? Over.
No questions?
Oh, sorry. Hi, Congressmember. Thank you. My name's Eleanor Acer. I work at an organization called Human Rights First. I would.
No, I really don't see. I don't really see you.
Huh? Should I stand somewhere else?
Stand up by the front podium, maybe. I don't really see. I just see a big room. I don't see faces.
Okay. Hi,
Or just wave your
Congressmember.
hand or something. Okay. Hello there.
Hi. My name's Eleanor Acer. I work at an organization called Human Rights First, and I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts in terms of what members of Congress can do in the face of the announcement we heard today to help make sure that people seeking asylum and other immigrants have access to fair process and legal counsel, as whatever deportation and detention initiatives move forward. Also, as you look forward to working more on potential legislation, just wanted to stress that our organization and many others represent asylum seekers who really do have legitimate claims. And how do we work together to make sure that there's a process that is humane and that manages the border effectively, but also allows the many, many people in the system to actually have their cases adjudicated fairly. Thank you so much.
Now, what's the announcement today that you're referring to?
Oh, sorry, the one that you mentioned earlier, the president's re-announcement of an intention to use the National Guard and/or federal troops to assist in massive detention.
He's going to have to be sued on that, and that it violates the Constitution. So I don't see how that's possible. But there will be. I'm sure many people will rise up to do that. As far as what you just said is so important about the asylum system. There are hundreds of thousands of people that have credible claims of being tortured and credible claims of really wanting to get asylum for legitimate purposes that are now caught up in this backlog system that nobody can even get to their cases because it's overwhelmed with all these other cases, again, of which 85% end up ultimately getting denied. So one of the things that we want to do that I proposed, along with Congressman Luttrell, is that we should stop encouraging, we should do everything we can to discourage people to come to the southern border. You know, the southern border is not really the purpose of seeking asylum. We should be setting up safe mobility offices throughout the world where people can apply for asylum in safe countries. We have pilot programs doing this now between the State Department and Homeland Security, where people can apply for asylum in other places in the world. So instead of, remain in Mexico, as which the president said, which causes all kinds of other problems with people remaining in Mexico, where they get abused and used, and people get abused and used on the way to the southern border, is we should be creating these safe mobility offices throughout the world where people can apply for asylum in other countries. And if you are granted asylum, you come. If you're not granted asylum, you don't come. So, but the southern border is not the place to be doing this. We're encouraging, a huge black market system to abuse the system in our country. And it's, of course, upsetting a lot of Americans in the process. And it's not working. It's overwhelmed. So we need to, fix this broken system so that people who do apply for asylum legitimately can get their cases processed more expeditiously. And part of that is to stop the inflow at the southern border and to set up these safe mobility offices, I believe, and to give more resources. I mean, the Senate Bipartisan Compromise had a lot more resources with immigration judges and asylum officers and, Border Patrol officers, and more wall and more money for New York and California and other places that are dealing with this problem, and a whole bunch of other stuff to address this problem. So we need everybody there to work to contact members of Congress to get them to sign on to this type of bipartisan effort. Okay, who else?
Congressman, can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And my name is, can you see me? Should I be close to the mic? Does that work?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. All right. My name's Bob Warren. I developed most of the methodology that allows us to know how many undocumented immigrants live in the country over the last 50 years. Okay. But I have a question for you. We had a policy in this country for over 100 years where it was called the registry provision. If you had been in the country for 15 years or more, you could come into the office and you could become a legal immigrant. Would you be in charge of reinstating that policy, which stopped when IRCA was passed? They set the date at 1973, right, and they have not moved it up in all these years. If they were to move that registry...
I'd certainly be in favor of it, but I don't think we could get the Republicans to be in favor of it. But some of the things that we've proposed are similar to that. It's been on a more piecemeal basis with like DACA recipients, TPS recipients,
Right.
trying to set up vehicles by which to accomplish that. My goal, from just my perspective, not speaking for my other members of Congress, my goal is to try and protect, millions of people, 5 million people, so that they could be here legally, and they could work, and they could pay their Social Security taxes, and they don't have to look over their shoulder anymore. I want to try and protect as many people as possible.
Right.
And, what's going to happen is the president is going to continue, president-elect is going to continue, with his effort of pushing this in a rough way, and he's going to focus very heavily on deporting criminals. And, I think we have to be careful about not pushing back too hard on that idea, because you say, oh, the Democrats don't even want to deport criminals. Now, I can pretty much guarantee that in their effort to deport criminals, they're going to make a mess of it. And then it's going to fall apart on its own weight, because they're not going to be able to organize it properly. And they're going to be riding roughshod over people. And the American people will be offended by it, because they'll make a lot of mistakes. But we have to be careful not to say, that we're opposed to deporting criminals. So, violent offenders. So it's going to be a very tough time ahead. So it's got to be a smart balance of resistance, but also of trying to actually solve the problem and working across party line. So the registry idea, of course, I would support that. More people I can protect, the better. But it doesn't matter what I want. It matters what can get done. And nothing's gotten done for 30 years. So we have to accept that reality. And now the Republicans are holding most of the cards, not all of the cards, but most of the cards.
Hi, I'm Margaret Cardilli from Immigrant Defenders Law Center, and I worked at the border for several years. And I want to thank you for mentioning the need for safe mobility offices. I think that is great. However, the reality is that a lot of asylum seekers cannot avail themselves of a safe mobility office. We saw Ukrainians that came to the border and needed our protection, and I think you would agree that it was great that we allowed hundreds of Ukrainians that were in a very desperate situation. There was no safe mobility office that could have protected them. And we know today, Haiti, how horrible the situation is right now, and a safety mobility office would not protect them. So I really, as I appreciate—
Why would a safe mobility office not protect the Ukrainians if we set it up in Poland, for example?
There's not enough capacity. This is a burden-sharing responsibility for the
No,
entire world.
We have to build capacity. There's no question we have to build capacity.
Including at the United States southern border. With all due respect, I've met and seen with my own eyes the men, women, and children who come to the United States border with nothing out of desperation. And I applaud you and I respect you for talking about safe mobility offices, but I implore you to understand that that is not a solution for every single human being that needs protection. Thank you.
There could be, people can apply for asylum at the ports of entry, but we should not be encouraging people to come to the southern border and pay coyotes and organized crime and cartels $10,000, $12,000 a piece to make that trek to come here, only to be denied ultimately. And plus, it's causing a major problem for the right now we're losing, but we want to look at virtual interviews as a possibility as well, and increasing the capacity at the ports of entry. If you've been to the southern border, the ports of entry are these dumpy things that were built in the 1950s, most of them, and they have very little capacity. So we need to be expanding that. And of course, under the president's executive order that he did, as well as on what we're proposing, is there'll be exceptions for emergent conditions. If somebody shows up at the border and it's obvious that they're being abused, or they're being they're out of desperation, they're being chased by criminals or by their country, they're being persecuted. Somebody shows up, they're obviously been tortured. There's going to be exceptions for emergency situations. But we need to stop looking at the southern border as the way to apply for asylum, as the first way to do it. It's not working. It's broken.
Congressman, one last question. Many of us are concerned that the Republicans are going to push through a very harsh border security bill like H.R. 2, which would have no legal immigration provisions whatsoever. Any advice to us on how we can prevent that from occurring?
Support reasonable ideas. I recognize you're not going to get nobody's going to get everything they want. And, H.R. 2 will not get any Democratic support. And they have a very tight majority in the House. And even in the Senate, it's not going to be easy to, they wouldn't even, well, Schumer wouldn't put it on the floor, but they'll have a hard time with H.R. 2 in the Senate as well. I think, if they pass it on party lines, it's possible that they could do that, which would be really bad. So we need to propose reasonable solutions, and we need to get other parties like businesses, like law enforcement, and religious groups, and even secular groups that are, believe in human dignity, to work together, to stand together, to say that they don't want to do these draconian type solutions. And historically, businesses say, "Oh, we don't want to do these bad things, and we want to help dreamers, and we want to do something with farm workers." But when push comes to shove, and they got to decide they want the tax bill legislation passed or they want the immigration legislation passed, they're going to lean towards the tax bill legislation. So, what we've been opposing the Republicans' efforts for years. They've been opposing our efforts for years, and it hasn't worked very well for either side. So what we need to do is find some common ground and recognize that neither side's going to get everything they want. And what I'm working on with Luttrell, and hopefully he'll continue pushing this forward, is trying to do something reasonable that secures the border, fixes the broken asylum system, and treats people like human beings by modernizing the legal immigration system. Nobody's going to get everything they want.
Thank you, Congressman. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. Get more people involved. The more people involved, the better. We need more people paying attention to this issue. Thank you.